This is the MeatEater podcast coming at you shirtless, severely bug-bitten, and in my case, underwearless.
We hunt the MeatEater podcast.
You can't predict anything.
The MeatEater podcast is brought to you by First Light. Whether you're checking trail cams, hanging deer stands, or scouting for elk, First Light has performance apparel to support every hunter in every environment. Check it out at firstlight.com. FIRSTLITE.com. Joined today by Dusty Lasseter, former Wyoming game and fish bear management specialist. The key word there being former.
Yeah.
I love the agency guys, but the problem with having agency guys on to talk about wildlife management is they got to worry about them getting in trouble.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about getting in trouble anymore. Can't
really,
fire
just
me.
No trouble. Nothing they can do to you.
I don't
Let the
think
air
so.
out of your tires.
Yeah. Write me a ticket, I guess. You know.
No, again, I have nothing but, I have like a lot of respect and admiration for agency biologists and game wardens. Like, I love it. So many of them are driven by passion and a desire to do good. But when talking about policy, it just gets tricky for them because, they get reprimanded.
Yeah, you get muzzled a little bit, and you're trying to walk the party line a little bit, the department line. So.
Yeah. Give everybody a run through of what you've done in your career around grizzly bears and wolves. And
Oh man, so I started in 2010, and I was just supposed to be on for one fall and one spring. I got hired on because one of my coworkers was going back to college, and that was the busiest year that we'd ever had. We caught 67 grizzly bears in Wyoming outside of Yellowstone National Park in that year. So
damn, man.
Yeah, it was
all in barrel traps.
Yeah, we call them culvert traps, but they're really big square box traps now. The Montana guys still use those culverts, but it's a pain in the butt to pull a bear in and out of them.
Yeah, you remember that? Remember that video of Callahan climbing in there, climbing in one of them tubes of that bear? He's basically like laid out on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we dealt with enough bears. We came up with a better trap design, honestly.
Yeah. What were you guys? Man, I got so many questions. Go on. Just remember that later I want to ask you about how you like, what your favorite bait and stuff is. But keep going.
Yeah.
So you got on. You guys started just hammering bears.
Yeah, it was just call after call. I would try to go home just to take a nap, and I would get flagged down on the road by somebody being like, I got a bear. Actually, one of those guys was Jim Zumbo.
Yeah.
He flagged me down on the road, and he's like, yeah, I just got back from Alaska. I'd killed my 20th black bear, and he was smoking some salmon, and a grizzly bear came by and smashed his salmon smoker.
Oh, I got it.
Huh. So, so I started.
Jim Zumbo.
Yeah.
Came home from Alaska, was smoking salmon that he brought home from Alaska, and a grizzly showed up and smashed Jim Zumbo's smoker.
Yeah, exactly. Huh. Yep. So
pretty legit.
Kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I want to one-up him with my George Bush story.
Uh-oh.
But go on, joking. Go on.
Yeah, so that was just a really busy season, and there was a need for more help. So they hired me on another season, and
because you were a big game guy.
Yeah, I was. I went to the University of Wyoming, got a finance degree, came home, and just loved where I lived. And when I came home, I was working in the thoroughfare as a guide, and just doing construction, trying to make ends meet. And,
and home is Cody.
Home is Cody. That's where I grew up, and I was just wrong place, wrong time, honestly, because there weren't a lot of people that went to college and came back, and I had a lot of knowledge and skill about horses in the backcountry, and my life was immersed in wildlife and bears growing up, and my parents worked for outfitters, and they were stopping in at the house and telling crazy stories, and I was just sucked in. So that's why I came home, and I wasn't intending to get into bear work, and I just fell into it, and the timing was right. And yeah, they hired me on, and that first year I saw 25 bears, and then that next season I was in on another 25 grizzly captures and had 50 under my belt in a pretty quick, amount of time. So
Were you doing all the relocations on those too? Like, how many are euthanized and how many are relocated?
So at the time, my boss was a guy named Mark Brasino, and we were really still in the recovery phase with these bears, and we probably only euthanized 1 out of 5 when I started, and they were in really bad shape. They'd been repeat offenders. It's never the 3 strikes and you're out. People say that all the time, and I get so sick of that.
That's not true?
No, that's not true. It's not California. So, but yeah, there were some bears that, had been in multiple livestock conflicts that we were removing, or I caught a female that year that her back leg was broke, and it was 6 inches shorter than her other back leg.
Okay.
And I had the bone in my office, and it's just a, melded piece of calcium.
How do you think she broke her leg?
No idea. Always wondered that.
So on a bear like that, on a grizzly like that, it's in bad shape, it's desperate, and you're not gonna what the word to use, you're not gonna rehabilitate it.
No, it just wasn't going to be successful relocating that kind of bear.
Yep.
And she was emaciated, and she actually had a yearling that we didn't know about at the time. She was trying to orphan a yearling bear because she was not even producing milk. She was in such poor physical shape.
Got it. You say she was trying to orphan it?
Yeah, I mean, it was following her around, but she's not providing for it at all. And we ended up catching that bear too, and we relocated that bear, but she just wasn't a good candidate for relocation.
Yeah. And when you relocate the grizzlies, how do you figure out where to try? Because you got to put them so far away from. You got to put them so far away. To reduce the temptation, they're going to get in trouble again, and that's got to be like very time consuming.
Yeah, it definitely takes some manpower, but you're trying to take it as far away from the conflict as possible. And there's really about 6 relocation sites in Wyoming that we use. And that kind of had changed over the time that I'd been at the department. We started doing some relocations that weren't as far. And
you use helicopters to dump them off?
We don't. We had one bear trap that you could take off the wheels and haul with a helicopter, but in the time that I was there, the 11 years I was there, we never did that.
Yeah. Now tell me how you catch one.
So most of the time you're using a culvert trap, and you want to get that thing as low to the ground as possible. You want to set it as close to the conflict as possible. And you just put a piece of bait in the front of that thing, usually a roadkill deer, with a string that goes up the front wall around the top, and then it's sitting on a pair of vice grips, and the door is sitting on those vice grips. So bear comes in, pulls that bait,
springs the vice grip,
and the door shuts, and there's a pin that shoots.
Yeah.
A lot of times we use beaver caster is always my favorite thing to
use a little lure.
Yeah, a little bit of lure in there. If it's keyed in on fruit, we'd use apples and watermelon, things like that.
Stick that in back of the trap.
Yeah, even like a trail into it a lot of times. And a lot of times you make a drag, and they'll follow a drag for a long, long ways.
Like drag a roadkill deer.
Right. Yep.
How far might you drag that deer to make a scent trail? I
mean, my old boss had done it a couple miles and caught bears running a couple miles on them. Yep. And they're finding now with these GPS collars that a bear can smell a carcass 10 to 15 miles away, and we'll just start beelining it for a carcass.
Yeah, I followed a grizzly bear track in the Bob once, 9 miles to I don't know how far he started, but I followed the tracks for 9 miles in front of me to a moose carcass.
Yeah.
That was impressive.
Yeah.
They got a pretty good sniffer.
Yeah. I've told the story to anyone that'll listen to it. but we were one time camped up on the Arctic slope, off the north slope of the Brooks Range.
Yeah.
And we were camped where a creek came into a bigger river. And one morning we got up and walked 3 miles up that tributary and killed a caribou. Okay. Spent the day up there, carried it down that tributary to our camp. That night we're sitting in our camp and here comes a grizzly down the gravel bar digging roots. You see him moving, digging. He gets to the mouth of that tributary. It's kind of like a slight little canyon. He gets to the mouth of that tributary and stands up like someone shocked him.
Wow.
Waves his nose in the air and took off at a full run. So I can't tell you for sure. You know what I mean? But it was like, there was no discussing it. It was like, that son of a bitch smells that caribou.
Yeah. I'm sure that's exactly what happened. Yeah.
Coming down that creek. And that's only 3 miles. And you're talking about how far?
GPS collars, they're saying 10 to 15.
What do you see on a GPS collar that suggests to you that a grizzly is onto something?
Well, it's meandering, and then all of a sudden it's a straight line. It's like, just like you're talking about. There wasn't any second thoughts in that bear's mind.
Got it. And then he's just going. Then
He's going.
Yeah. There's a lot of brouhaha in the news right now. There's always been a bear. There's always been a very polarizing bear.
Yeah.
In the a polarizing bear in the Yellowstone National Park area.
Yeah.
Goes by the handle 399, which I always like because I like it when they give the animals like a name like Petals or something, then you know it's trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So if it has its research number,
There's some clinical detachment there.
yeah, a research number allows the citizens at large to stay usually allows citizens at large to stay a little chilled out about celebrity animals. But 399, it might as well have been named Cookie.
Right.
Right. It just got really famous. And the American public, particularly those who are very unfamiliar with wildlife, will have this view that they look at an individual animal and they see it with like crystalline clarity, that one, and they cease to view it as in context of its like species at large. Meaning you could have 800 grizzlies in an area and it's kind of whatever. But that one, nothing better happened to.
Right.
Right. They're not it's not like they don't have an awareness of the population at large. They have an awareness of that one. I'm not lecturing you. I'm just trying to update listeners.
Yeah.
When making an analogy about it, I'll make the analogy of that someone like a hunter, someone in the someone in hunter-based wildlife conservation might view habitat as an apple tree. And if this apple tree is taken care of, it will continuously produce apples. And the apples are somewhat expendable. Some get eaten, some die and rot. Take care of the tree in perpetuity. It'll put apples out. Animal rights people and preservationist-minded people aren't that interested in the apple tree. But now and then there's an apple that really catches their eye.
Yeah.
And they are very concerned about what happens to that apple.
Yeah. It's a good analogy, I guess.
This bear became that apple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bear 399.
It's usually an apple that photographs well.
And
It's
photographs
pretty-
a lot.
It's pretty dependable.
Doesn't rot.
It's an apple that shows up again and again.
Yeah.
You know.
Or it'd be like a moose that's piebald.
Mm-hmm.
So, because moose, generally people aren't able to distinguish one from the other. Then you get a moose in some neighborhood that has a white splotch on it. And then people are able to put individuality to it. And then someone gets that moose and it causes a whole shit show. 399, the bear, had books written about it. It just got hit by a car.
Yeah.
In our little preamble chat, I brought up to you that that bear now is getting its final. It's being put to rest with much fanfare and consternation.
Yeah.
I mentioned it to you, and you had a comment about your view on this particular bear. You didn't deal with it professionally, correct?
No. I know her type, though.
Yeah. Tell me about that bear. What you mentioned a thing about management.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's poor wildlife management. And we learned this lesson early on with a bear named 104. So before 399, there was a bear named, the number was 104.
It was a celebrity bear.
Celebrity bear, another
Yeah.
shiny apple,
Yeah.
if you will. And my predecessors tried to relocate that bear, move her. She got so, not trap shy, but trap,
Savvy.
not savvy. Like, she enjoyed traps. You could you could drive down the road with the door open, and she'd come running down the road and jump in the trap, and you would catch her. You know, she was that
Kind of freaky.
Because it just associated it with food.
yeah, because there were so many positive experiences jumping in traps, and
Just you eat the whole damn deer, and then some guy lets you out.
yeah, exactly. And you walk back home.
Yeah.
It's like a little
I get it.
Airbnb.
I get it.
Yeah. So we just learned early on that those habituated bears aren't successful. And she also got hit by a vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
104. And, you know, I always thought that was going to happen to 399. It took longer than I would have guessed.
You pictured it getting struck by a car.
Yeah. And one of her cubs got hit by a car. You know, and really, the Park Service could talk about more. They probably know all the individual cubs that she had, but as far as I'm aware, there's only one of her cubs that's still alive and existing, because they just get so habituated to people. They
Mhm.
don't learn normal bear manners, is what I call it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, one of her cubs got shot by a guy who he was hunting, and he's in his camper, and this bear's walking right at him like it's coming to eat him, you know.
Mhm.
But that bear's used to getting its picture taken,
Mm-hmm.
and that guy's scared for his life because he thinks this bear's gonna hurt him.
And you don't think it was?
Oh, God, it was so used to people, it was smiling the whole way it was coming in, I'm sure, you know. So I just don't think it sets bears up for success. And 399 was really polarizing. I mean, some people loved her, some people hated her. I think people forget that she mauled a guy years ago. So, I mean, she was still a grizzly bear. And
When you
What-
say people hated that bear, do you mean that they hated that bear because it was a symbol for something?
I think so. I think people would make comments that I would see, and it would really ruffle feathers, where, you know, if they would say things like, if they delist grizzly bears and I can hunt, I'm going to shoot that bear. And that just, you know, that really affected people negatively. So,
Well, that Shane who got scratched up by the bear,
He sat right in his
Yeah, he
chair you're
sat-
sitting in.
Yeah.
yeah.
and he had good reason to believe that it was $3.99. That's what he'd said.
Well, how would they not know for certain?
Sorry that he was scratched up by.
Yeah,
399?
that was one of the things that he said. And
Yeah.
She was in the
right.
vicinity.
she was in the vicinity, but it was like, if $3.99 was the one that did this to you, we don't want to know about it. Was that kind of a thing? So it's, I mean, that was one of the things that he mentioned sort of offhandedly, and he's like, if it was $3.99, I don't think anybody would come out and declare to the world that $3.99 had done this and needs to get destroyed, because it would just cause such an uproar.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like there's like a buffer zone built around this bear to protect it from the consequences of its bad behavior once people get so attached to it.
Yeah, I got you.
But he posted, I think when 399 died too, he posted something again to the effect of like, there's a good chance that this was the bear that did it.
Wow. Let me ask you another one.
Yeah, that was a hard question. I'm sure people are going to cry over that. So 399 was just touched a lot of heartstrings.
Rip.
Yep.
Rest in
But
peace.
399 was never going to die, you know, in a warm bed with a roaring fire surrounded by loved ones, right? Like,
No.
Yeah.
I always think that's the craziest part, is like getting whacked by a car is not the worst way to go.
Humane.
Cal-
If you're a
yeah.
wild animal.
Cal went out. Cal did. There's a Cal in the field about this on YouTube. If you type in Cal in the field grizzly bear, you'll see this one. But there's a Cal in the field where he goes out with some Idaho guys, and they culvert trap a
Yeah.
grizzly and work up the grizzly. So they culvert trap a grizzly, and it's got a lip tattoo. So they, like an identifying marker.
Right.
They call in the lip tattoo, and They're like, oh, we know that bear. They had a collared female grizzly in the park. She found a carcass. She found a buffalo carcass and was on it, and they get a mortality signal. And they go there, and there's their sow with the collar dead on top of the buffalo carcass, and standing on top of the both of them is this male bear.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. But man, you could explain that kind of stuff all day long, like that the number one cause of death of Yellowstone wolves is wolves. Like you could explain that stuff all day long, but it is never gonna. It just doesn't resonate. You know, people will look at certain causes of death. Like if 399 had been killed by a male grizzly, I don't think people would be upset. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, people
they're
put,
upset because they're upset because it's human caused.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people put different values on different animals, and they even at the individual level put values on animals, and
Yeah.
people just really valued that bear. So
Let me hit you with another easier to answer one, but you'll get this will make other people mad.
good.
Now you're gonna we have a full spectrum of listeners.
Sure.
We got the horseshoe. We got righties, lefties, and then we got where the righties and the lefties meet, which is crazy redneck hippies.
Sure. Yeah.
So no matter what you say, you're always gonna get someone that's gonna get mad at you. And this will be a thing where the right bottom of the horseshoe will get very irritated no matter what you say. Bear spray or pistols? For like when you're out,
Yeah.
knowing what you know, having dealt with as many grizzlies as you've dealt with, and been to as many conflict sites as you've been to, and touched as many of them as you touched to,
Yeah.
and talked to as many people who've been messed up by grizzlies as you've talked to.
Yeah.
Bear spray or pistol?
Without a doubt, bear spray.
Really?
Yeah. And
Tell me more. Now I'm mad.
yeah.
You did promise that
He's
this,
a
his
gun
answer would
grabber.
make
I
Yeah.
knew it. He's a gun grabber. The other day, Yanni was talking about them needing to ban the Red Rider.
Oh,
I was like,
geez.
"No, you're a gun grabber, trying to take away
What-
people's Red Riders."
What was his?
He's got some cockamamie theory that if teaching a kid to shoot on a Red Rider, they get used to a heavy trigger pull.
Yeah, he was bashing the
I
trigger.
remember my little
That's a
kids.
fair point.
Yeah,
Well-
my little kids shooting Red Riders. I remember they used to shoot them with two fingers because you cannot get that
Oh,
thing
yeah.
to go off.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was going to be like he was anti-BB gun fights.
No, he thinks a Red Rider teaches bad form, and I think that's a very un-American statement. But let's return.
That's how you shoot your eye out.
Bear spray unequivocally.
Yeah, I have one caveat to that. If you're really well experienced with handguns, then by all means carry a handgun.
Okay.
But a lot of people just aren't. And I investigated so many cases of self-defense, defense of life shootings, and people are just really bad shots with pistols.
Okay.
And a lot of times they would even hit the bear, but they don't hit it lethally.
Okay.
And bear spray, the beauty of it is it makes a 4-foot cloud. So you don't have to be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And how much do they hate that bear spray?
I've never seen it not work. So
Really?
yeah.
Do you know that I read a statistic, and I didn't really spend a lot of time on it.
If you spray it on the ground, they'll come sniff it though. It becomes an attractant.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you a good one about that a little bit. But I read a statistic, and I never really spent much time on it, but it seemed significant that 25% of the time, 25% of the time when a firearm is discharged in a bear attack, it hits a human.
Yeah, that's the other reason.
Have you heard that?
No, I haven't heard that statistic. That seems high. There's a lot of
Not
shooters out there.
But listen, man, like I know a bunch of cases where that's happened, and I haven't looked into it. I just read it.
You know, there was a case on the Montana-Idaho border. It ended up being in Montana where a guy was getting mauled, and his buddy tried to shoot the bear off him and actually killed his friend.
Yeah, they had shot that bear. They were black bear hunting. They mistook it for a black bear, so they shot it, and the bear runs into the brush. He thinks he hit a black bear, so he goes trailing in there after it, and boom.
I just remember it was so close on the border, they didn't know who had jurisdiction.
Got it. Got it.
But yeah, so that's why I carry bear spray, and you know, ultimately it's up to people. I know there's gun lovers that want to carry guns, and that's fine, but a lot of people just don't practice shooting pistols enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it does say a lot about your the choice might say more about your mind frame than it does your sense of strategy.
Right.
I remember being like up at Sportsman's Warehouse in Anchorage and seeing people that just got off a plane and they were going to buy a pistol for their Alaska vacation and then, you know, pawn it off or whatever at the end of the vacation. Like, I think there's an assumption that if you believe in the handgun, like you just go get one, you get a box of ammo and you keep it near you. And like, that's just a recipe for disaster. But I think there's a lot of overconfident, and I myself, I have no confidence in my handgun shooting ability, and I shoot one pretty regularly. But
I'll tell you I'll walk you through my irrational thoughts on it.
Yeah.
If there's slight risk of, first off, I condemn and yell at and harass and tease anyone that carries bear spray where there's no grizzlies. Indefensible.
It works on lions.
What if it's just on your bino harness?
Then I'll
like
tease
mine
you.
is
I'll
all
tease
the
you and
time.
harass you,
I
'cause-
guess I'm tease-worthy and harass-worthy.
Because bear spray is not nice to get shot with, and they go off. I've been never mauled by a bear, been charged by them, but never mauled. But twice I've been hosed by people's bear spray.
Yeah, mine doesn't come off my bino harness.
That's the
Trust me.
gift that
Trust
keeps
me.
giving.
So I should start
and are you
removing-
replacing it every 2 years?
Yes.
Trust me, it's like it happens.
Okay.
Those are not the plastic nozzles on those cans are not invulnerable.
Okay.
One time, just standing around a car unloading backpacks, someone stepped on the plastic nozzle. Everything. And one time I got pickpocketed in a willow choked hellhole. And all of a sudden I was like, what is that noise going? All your shit's done. All your gear is gone. You cannot get it out.
Wait, is it bad to keep your bear spray
In your
the
car?
bino? Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
keep
with
it
the
in ammo.
fluctuating temperature.
It'll total your car.
You don't want
And
direct
I know
sunlight.
people whose car has been totaled. Your car, when
I
that goes
should
off in your
excuse
car,
myself
it
from
will
this
total your
podcast
car.
right now. Temperatures are
Yeah,
dropping.
I had a friend who did that, and he's still driving his vehicle.
Oh,
but
really?
He
I'd
says
be
it's
more
the
worried
gift
about
that keeps
summertime.
on giving.
Yeah.
Right,
it's
right,
just all
then,
the time.
Get a small ammo can. There's one right outside the door of the studio. Get a small ammo can and put it in the ammo can. And then when you're using it, carry it. When you're done using it, put it in an ammo can. I'm gonna tell you my irrational logic, but let me tell you my funny story.
Yeah.
We had the Rinella family. We went into the summer with 2 bear sprays. And we have like a little camping spot where there's grizzlies. So when we get there, before I get a sense of what's going on, I'll like tell my kids, like, take the spray if you're gonna go fish, or take the spray and bring the dog. And then once we kind of get a sense of what's up, everybody relaxes about it. But at first, it's thick, you know. At first, I'll be like, take the bear spray. So at the end of the summer, we only have now, there's 1 bear spray. And of course, no one knows what happened to the other bear spray. Well, me and my wife are up shutting our little camping area down. And here, right outside of our little composting outhouse toilet,
Yeah.
right outside the door is the can of bear spray, empty with 4 holes in it. It got ate by a bear.
Got eaten by a bear. Seen that before. Yeah.
Here's my irrational logic.
Okay.
Slight risk of grizzlies, I use spray. High risk of grizzlies, I bring my 10 millimeter pistol. Ultra high risk of grizzlies, I bring my sawed off pump 12 gauge with slugs in it.
Yeah.
I've done
Spray and pray.
and I always look at it, and I always look at all 3 of them. I'm like, hey man, like, what are you thinking here?
That's a myth I can dispel too. Is people take shotguns and they alternate buckshot and slugs.
Oh yeah, because I know that. No, I think it's supposed to. Brody told me you're supposed to run 2 bird shots.
Yeah.
Then you start
don't
going.
do that.
Then you start going slug buckshot. Because it's like you warn it, boom. You
Yeah.
warn it, boom. Then like it's getting closer. Now you hit it with a slug, boom. Then it's so close, and everything's so chaotic. Then you start going buckshot.
And most bears are aware of this choreography, this elaborate choreography before they.
Yeah, all the time in the world to reload.
There's
too.
the warning shot.
Yeah.
There's the warning shot.
He tells his buddy, listen, when you're coming in, he's going to hit you 2 bird shots.
Yeah.
Then you got to dodge the slug. Watch out for the buckshot.
Yeah. A zig and then a zag.
Here's my scenario that I find myself in all the time. As most hunters, we don't get to pick our weather, but we do get to pick which direction we walk when we're out hunting. And most of the time, the wind's in my face. And
Yeah.
a lot of times, the wind's honking. I don't trust bear spray when the wind's blowing.
Okay. So I've had that question a bunch over the years, and I had a really good friend who was horn hunting in the spring. It was super windy out. A sow with cubs, real little cubs, charges him, and the wind's in his face. He sprays bear spray. Half of it goes in her face, half of it gets in his face. They both ran off crying. So
It did work, though.
it
worked.
The propellant still gets out there, but not as far as it normally would.
I'd love to practice
Really?
in the wind, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
I'd like to get a case of those inert cans.
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah. We
I
should
sh-
get a case of those inert cans.
I
And just like
sh-
shoot each other around like laser tag around the
Yeah.
office.
That would be fun.
I tried to shoot a sow and cubs with a can of bear spray out of a window. And when I was working
What
up
the hell
in
you doing that
In
for?
Yellowstone? Is this
And
legal?
they were coming in and tearing up our cat. When I was working up in Alaska, they'd come in and tear up stuff on the porch of
Oh,
the
and you're
cabin.
trying to give them a bad
Yeah,
taste.
and like they would come in, they'd get into the fish shack, they'd get into the tool shed, they'd eat rubber boots, they'd do all this stuff. And like, so I stayed in the main lodge that they kept coming into and opened the window, and they were walking past, and I sprayed it, and it might have been just outside of the range, but all that bear spray went whoosh along the building, and they like went 10 feet back and stood up, and then kind of circled around and came right back in.
I would have laughed if they
Then
come in
started-
there and killed you.
Yeah, they're licking
Well, I
the
shut
cabin.
the window real quick. And then actually we sat around. I was with this kid. We just like we were sitting in the cabin like later on, like 45 minutes later, and we were both kind of like, does it smell weird in here? And then we started getting like, like licking your cheeks and like your lips and stuff. And we'd gotten
burn.
like a trace amount inside, and it had been swirling and swirling. And we spent like the rest of the night just like kind of licking our lips and rubbing our noses and stuff. And, But yeah, that was my one experience actually discharging a can.
Can I tell you a story?
Yep.
Please.
That's why you're here.
I'm jealous.
Yeah.
I was impressed that Randall got to shoot at one with a spray. But go on. Tell
I
the
have
story.
video of it somewhere.
I actually never did get a spray a bear with one, but I was deer hunting one fall, and I was going in some really heavy dark timber, and my dad always taught me to load a round in my gun. So I'm going through the timber, and I walk under this tree, and there's a magpie sitting in the tree, and he's just staring at me. He's just looking right down at me, and I'm looking up at him, and I'm thinking, boy, that's weird. You know, that magpie.
Why is he hanging out here?
Yeah, why is he hanging out? We're just staring at each other. And I go another, 30 yards, and I hear something, and I turn around, and there's this boar coming down the hill at me. He's coming right at me. And
How
I'm
many yards away?
Maybe 20.
Okay.
I mean, he's coming for me. And I was thinking to myself, I got one shot with this rifle, I got one chance to kill this thing, and it's going to be on top of me. And I realized what my dad was trying to teach me was just to be prepared, and I would have been way better off with a can of bear spray in my hand, just walking through the woods. And as a guide, I do that sometimes. If it's real tight quarters, I don't have a problem walking around with a can of bear spray. Even if you spray yourself, you're going to live to talk about it.
So what happened?
I
I sprayed him and he didn't care.
I started yelling at him, and he was coming down the hill at me, and he just kind of did a quarter pass, which is like a classic bear move. It was a bluff, but I thought it was the real deal. And I just remember thinking, like, I got to wait until this thing is right on top of me before I shoot, because I only got one chance. So
What is, after all those bears you worked up, what is a big bear in the Rockies?
a big bear is 500 pounds. The biggest bear I ever caught was 624 in the spring. Would have been a true 700-pound bear in the fall. When people would come in
But
the
that's
office,
a big bear.
that's a huge bear.
Because every bear is like 1,000 pounds, 800
Yeah,
pounds.
I just cut people's number in half immediately. Whatever it is, I cut it in half.
I mean, when they tell you how big the bear was?
Yeah, yep. And all those bears I worked up, the sows are almost always right around 300 pounds. 275, 325.
Okay.
They stop growing when they're about 7 to 8 years old.
Okay.
Where the males just keep putting on weight, keep getting bigger. So a 500-pound adult male is a huge bear in the Yellowstone ecosystem.
That's a huge bear.
Yeah.
And what's a more typical male? Like what is like a 4 or 5 year old male?
250, I don't know. 300.
God, they seem so much bigger and badder.
Yeah.
I mean, they're bad, but they seem so much bigger.
Yeah, and people overestimate wolves too, and really, lions are way bigger than wolves, but people, because of the hair, especially in the fall, bears and wolves, but bears especially, they get that winter coat on, and people just think they're way bigger than they are.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, it's a sow with 2 full-grown cubs, and it's like, no, that thing weighs 150 pounds, but it's got so much hair, it looks like as big as her.
Yeah. You were with the agency when the delisting looked like it was going to go through.
Yeah.
Okay.
It did go through.
Well, sorry, when it looked like they were, no, well, it did and then it undid.
They were delisted.
Yeah, multiple times.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Right.
help me with the timeline here, just to give people a rough sense. What'll happen is, well, first off, let me say this is surprisingly not a partisan like Democrat versus Republican issue generally. Grizzly bears. Well, hear me out because I'm going to talk about the delistings. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can give that because there's definitely a tendency, but I just think that people have the opinion, they have the erroneous idea that somehow like a governor or whatever can just declare right that something would happen, right? That you would
right
that it's a simple, that doing this is a simple process. It just takes the right political figure to do it. I'm going to explain how it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Right.
In 1974, 1975, grizzly bears in the lower 48 were listed as an endangered, they were listed as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. So they were given federal Endangered Species Act protection under the ESA in 74, 75. Dick Nixon.
Don't remember him. Heard of him.
Okay. Republican. Signed in the ESA, signed in
NEPA,
signed in then he established the EPA.
Yeah, that's NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the native NILC. No, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
All right, never mind. Richard Nixon creates the Endangered Species Act, and one of the first like marquee species to get protection under that is grizzly bears in the lower 48. All kinds of years go by, and wildlife managers kind of look and say, well, saying the lower 48 is not a great way of looking at this. For instance, Golden Gate Park in San Francisco once upon a time had grizzly bears, and we don't view that Golden Gate Park is going to recover, that San Francisco is going to recover its grizzly bear population.
Right.
Just never going to work. So over time they establish, they take a look and they go like, where really could we have grizzly bears? Like where is the right food resources, low enough human population, proper habitat, where you could feasibly have a population of grizzly bears? And they come up with 6. One is in the what they call the Northern Cascade ecosystem. So one is like basically the Northern Cascades in Washington, where you're kind of rolling into BC.
0 bears.
Sometimes 1.
Sometimes 1.
It depends on what side of the.
He's Canadian.
Yeah, it depends on what side of the border.
If you're from Wyoming, it looks a lot like 0 bears.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, if they have a bear, it's because one walked over there for a minute.
Right.
Moving eastward, You have the Bitterroot Selkirk, Selway. None.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Kind of
No.
none.
Selkirks have bears. The Bitterroot doesn't.
The Bitterroot side.
Yeah.
That's one. Oh, I forgot they gave a name to these things. Did I already say the name? They call them distinct population segments.
Right.
So they say, okay, we're going to say that there's a grizzly bear population or the possibility of a grizzly bear population in the Northern Cascades. There's another one in
Cabinet yaks.
that's right.
Yeah.
Cabinet Yak has bears.
Yep. About
Bitterroot
50.
Selkirk.
Bitterroot Selway.
Selway, sorry.
Selkirks are
Yep.
in BC.
Yep. Bitterroot Selway. Northern Continental Divide,
Mm-hmm.
which is Bob Marshall, Glacier National Park, and some other areas up there, all the way out to the Front Range. Then the GYE. Did I
Yeah.
do them all? Am I missing any?
Oh, you got 'em
I
all.
think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they go like, so let's stop talking about the lower 48 writ large and let's get real. Okay.
Right.
And talk about where could we actually have these bears. And then they looked at like, okay, so instead of saying that we're going to recover them across their range in the lower 48, which basically was the 100th meridian westward, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, into northern Old Mexico, coastal California, right? Like, let's just look at this. And so they say, let's say that we're going to try to recover and manage these as distinct population segments. And they look and say, if we're going to do that, there's two places: the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem and the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, which is a chunk of ground about the size of Indiana. And they're like, those are recovered. The rest of the lower 48, not, but these areas are recovered. And so let's move those out of Endangered Species Act protection. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has management authority.
Right.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has to come forward, and they do this. This has happened with Democrats in the White House. This has happened with Republicans in the White House. They'll come forward and say, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says, we propose that we delist the grizzly. Then you have preservationists or like 399 type people. Preservationist organizations will go like, well, Jesus, that could mean that 399 could get hunted. So then they will sue in federal court to block the delisting.
Right.
So they'll delist, and then there's a lawsuit, and they'll never sue on basis. They don't sue on how many bears there are. They sue on, well, we don't think the DPS thing was fair.
Yeah. Right.
Because you can't treat them as distinct because a bear could move from one to the other. So we're going to attack the logic of the DPS, or they'll say, well, have you considered white bark pine blister rust and how there's a fungus that's killing white bark pines, and grizzlies like to eat white bark pines. And since we don't know what will really happen in the long term to white bark pines, we're suing to block the listing. Or, well, what if cutthroat trout don't do that well in the future, and 10% of bears might eat a cutthroat trout at some point in their life? So we're going to sue to block the delisting because we don't really know how well cutthroats are doing.
The risks.
Because
on the population.
The Fish and Wildlife Service is required as part of that review process to consider all factors. And they kind of have an impossible job, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like they basically are saying, we did a comprehensive review, our conclusions are X, Y, and Z. And the litigators are saying, well, it's not that comprehensive.
Yeah.
You missed this, you missed that. And they're kind of poking holes in the bigger picture.
Yeah, and it will come from anti-hunting organizations like Center for Biological Diversity, Humane Society of the United States, who's another
Greater
big
Yellowstone
player.
Coalition.
Greater Yellowstone Coalition. Who else is a common player here? Center for Biological
Western
Diversity.
Watershed.
Okay. And they'll do these delistings, or they'll sue to block the delistings.
Last one was the Crow
The Crow tribe.
tribe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What was the argument there?
That we shouldn't be delisting. You know.
That's interesting. That was a long preamble to my question.
Yeah.
You were around for all this.
Yes. Yeah.
Now,
both of them.
Okay, what
It
I
happened
remember being
twice.
really interesting about this is the three states that have chunks of ground in what we call the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, a name that I resent because they should call it the Greater Cory ecosystem.
Yeah, they should call Wyoming bears.
Yeah, they should call it the Greater Cory ecosystem.
Most of them are in Wyoming.
Yeah, the Wyoming ecosystem.
Yeah.
There's 3 states. The bulk of it's in Wyoming. But the 3 states take an attitude where they're like, okay, if delisting goes through and we take, what that means is the states now manage it as wildlife under their jurisdiction. Idaho says, this is 2020. Is this when this happened last?
17.
Yeah,
Was
I
it
think a little
2017?
earlier. Yeah.
Idaho says, we're going to give out 1 grizzly tag.
Yeah.
Montana, chicken shits out.
Right.
And they say, not going to play this game. We're not doing any grizzly tags.
Montana actually had to give part of their quota to Idaho so that Idaho could have 1.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wyoming just lays it all on the table.
Yeah.
And they're going to give out 24 tags.
Right. Yeah.
Guys like me who really think that the grizzly should be delisted, and I think that state management, and I'm very open and enthusiastic about a very limited grizzly bear hunting season. Guys like me,
Sure.
as part of our rhetoric, if we were being unscrupulous, we would say that by opening up a hunting season, it'll reduce conflict because bears will learn to be scared of people.
Not true.
That's why I stopped saying it, because it was intellectually dishonest.
Yeah.
Talk about that. I just spent like an hour setting up the question, but give me your feelings on all of this whole deal. All of this hunt, don't hunt.
Oh, man.
The bears need to learn to be scared and respect humans and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I don't know where you even start. You opened up so many holes there.
I opened up
holes.
a bait shop, not just a can of
Bait
worms.
shop.
It's the whole
Yeah.
bait shop.
Do you think grizzlies would be nervous of people if we started hunting them again?
I
If
personally don't.
Idaho got 1.
Yeah, if Idaho got 1.
Did you hear about Bear 422?
I mean, maybe at some level, I don't know personally because I haven't been there, but they talk about bears on Kodiak Island being like really weary of human scent
Mm-hmm.
because they're heavily hunted.
And always have been.
And always have been, and same with Sweden. So maybe at some level, but the reality is, you have black bear populations all over America that are hunted, and there's still black bear conflicts. So you're still going to have conflicts with bears. Bears do learn on experience with humans. If they have a negative encounter, then they're more likely to run away from a human. But I just don't think you'll hunt them at a level that would change their behavior.
Yeah.
So, they delisted in 2007, and that delisting went from 2007 to 2009 when a judge put them back on the list because
It's always the same judge in Missoula.
well, this was a different judge.
Oh, it was? Oh.
Yeah, there was Malloy and then Dana Christensen. And we knew we were in trouble when Dana Christensen had said, my spirit animal is the Wolverine, Any judge with
That's cultural appropriation anyways.
yeah, I don't know. Any judge with a spirit animal.
Yeah, taking it personal.
They should have gotten him. They should have attacked him from the woke spectrum and said that that's cultural appropriation and you should be fired.
That was before wokeness, I believe.
Man, my
Yeah.
computer's freaking out, man. I just dumped
Got
a huge
another
coffee.
one
It just
prepared
died.
for you.
Damn
Put
it.
some more coffee on that.
It
You-
died.
For
Want
for
my notes?
anyone
Here.
listening, Steve spilled a large cup of coffee on his computer moments before we began recording.
Phil, do you have the technical capabilities to plug that clip in?
Which clip?
Well, no, because I was kind of talking
coffee
about. I was
spill.
talking.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so
but
we can do
cut
like a
out
little
me talking-
rewind.
Cut out me saying that bad stuff about that actor, though.
Really
One of those dudes that doesn't really inspire.
Oh, shit.
Oh.
He's one of those dudes that doesn't really inspire like
IT guy.
real fandom.
No.
I was observing that there's an actor that's in a lot of movies, but
Yeah.
no one cares about him, and I don't
Yeah.
want that
Well,
to
that's
get
I,
out.
mean, I feel like that's the definition of a great character actor. No one cares about him, but you're happy to see him, right? I am. I don't know.
He always brings it.
Yeah.
So back to this, and pardon me for not knowing what I'm talking about. I thought it was the same judge both times, but anyways,
No, you're right that they do go judge shopping. That's part of this whole thing. But yeah, 2007 to 2009, Wyoming didn't have a hunting season. Even though the population was recovered, we could have used hunting as a management tool. And when they got relisted, I think the state's opinion was the next time they get delisted, we're going to hunt these things. And it's not to control the population, it's to create a social pattern of hunting.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
That's what I want the states to do it, because I want them to quickly exercise the management authority.
And
Yeah, and
normalize it.
Montana chickening out was a bad move in my opinion, because you're setting a precedent that that you're not hunting them.
Yeah, and I remember they were going to chicken out for 5 years or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's true this time around too. They've said that recently in recent history.
Yeah, I don't know that they would make that choice now, but at the time they had a plan to like formally chicken out for 5 years.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting about that? Like when I say like even the Idaho play, as weird as it was to do one, the Idaho play of the social maneuver of doing the hunt.
Right.
I remember I was talking to these guys that were really involved in the elk reintroduction in Kentucky, and they were nervous about this. So they, ever since when they start working on the elk reintroduction, which was the state agency, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, it was like, because of hunting, and we'll hunt them, even though it's years in the future.
Yeah.
They baked it into every conversation to not then down the road go like, oh, hey, now that we got all these elk, how about we have a hunting season? It was like they were deliberate about setting an expectation that that's where this would go. And when you see signs around, anywhere you go around in this area, you'll see signs. Delisting means hunting. And it's meant to be, delisting means hunting, and it's meant to be like an anti-delisting.
Yeah.
They're coming right out and saying, we're not looking to argue about how many bears there are, because no one's going to argue that bears are stable. They're looking to be like, they're using the ESA, they're using the Endangered Species Act, not as a management tool. They're using it as a way that they can prevent something from happening that they don't want to happen.
Right.
It's like, it's the My Favorite Animal Protection Act. It is not the Endangered Species Act. And they even know it, and their rhetoric mirrors it. But when I look and I see that sign, delisting means hunting, I always think, I sure hope they're right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
You know?
you're rooting for that.
And they'll always show a sow with cubs, the one they use around here.
Sure.
They show a sow with cubs with a crosshair.
Yeah.
I'm like, but you can't shoot sows with cubs.
Yeah, that wouldn't be legal anyways.
So there's a poacher. They should arrest that person.
Yeah. We actually had I remember having fights talking about how many bears we were going to harvest. And a game warden in a district that has a lot of bears thought that 24 was not nearly enough. And,
Is that right?
And was upset about it. And it's like, we're not trying to manage the population totally through hunting. We're trying to create a social standard for hunting.
You know,
I say we, but that was past.
When we first started this podcast a million years ago, in an office where me and my wife had dinner, not a great one either. Across the road from our original old office. Last night on our little date night. Anyways, in that office upstairs, one of our early podcasts, when we first launched the podcast, we had a guy from the USGS, Frank McMahon. What is his name?
Van Manen.
Van Manen. We had him on to talk about he does demographics on grizzly bears.
Sure.
So the USGS it's a federal organization, and the USGS doesn't do policy. The USGS doesn't manage land. Okay, like the U.S. Forest Service, the USDA manages land. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service manages refuges. The National Park Service manages parks. You have a bunch of land management federal agencies. The USGS doesn't do land management. They don't do policy. Their mandate is information.
Sure.
They provide information.
Right.
So this guest we had, it's a great podcast if you want to go back and listen. A lot of it's still relevant today. This guest we had explained, we got to talk about demographics. Grizzly bear demographics. And there's the number at that time. I don't know what the number is now. The number at that time was something it was fixed. It was carved in stone.
Yeah.
700.
740.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And he explained, I was like, where does that number come from? What they had looked at is, at a time they looked at, okay, in this ecosystem, how much space does a breeding age female use?
30 square kilometers was the estimate at that
That was
time.
the estimate, okay.
Yep.
And they would draw, what's that little shape you draw on a map? An octagon or
Polygon.
a polygon?
Yeah. It was actually a grid,
Okay.
but yeah, and that was called the Chow 2 model.
Yeah, explain. Yeah, okay, so you know all about this shit.
Yeah.
Explain how the number was arrived at, and then I'm going to share with you something he told me about the number that I was we spent an hour talking about.
Yeah.
Because he would say at least, I'd go, how many? At least 740. Well,
Yeah.
how many? At least 740.
Yeah.
Well, how many? At least 740.
Yeah. So that model's been updated twice since then.
Okay, but explain how it's really fascinating how you make a model like this.
Okay, so bears are really hard to count because
Mhm.
they're solitary in nature. They're not territorial. Their home ranges overlap. So
Did you say solitary but not territorial?
right?
Huh.
They like to be individualistic, but they don't have territories. Not like a mountain lion, solitary nature has a territory. It's keeping other cats out of there. So if there's food availability, their home ranges overlap.
Oh, I never even thought about that term. That's a great term.
and-
Solitary but not territorial.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with the model. That's what makes them really difficult to count. So the early research showed that a grizzly bear sow's home range was 30 square kilometers. So when they were counting, if you're counting bears and you break the ecosystem up into a grid, and there's a sow with cubs in one of those squares,
Mm-hmm.
you cross off that grid because you don't want to, you want to lean conservative. You don't want to overestimate the population.
Okay.
The problem with that model is as the population gets higher in density, your model gets more and more biased because of those home ranges overlapping.
Yep.
So that model maxed out at 740. Like, I can't remember, 750 maybe. You couldn't get it. You couldn't shove any more grizzly bears into the ecosystem in that model. They went back and they looked at collar data and they found out that sow's home range was more like 14 square kilometers. You know, they have
This is great, but I want to add in a thing here
Yeah.
that he had explained that when they make the model, you're trying to count breeding age females. And then you look
females
at
with cubs of the year.
okay, and then you
little
look at what
cubs.
you know about the demographics, meaning that you could go into let's say you could go into a country perhaps and count how many females with children are in this country. And then probably go like, okay, so we know human males and human females are born at a 1-to-1 ratio. We know that like a female is most active reproductively between 24 and 38, and that they have on average 2.2 kids. And so we can just look at how many moms there are and make a guess at what the human population is in that country. And that's kind of what you're doing with grizzlies, right? You're like, we know that you got males, you got cubs, but if we can know this one number, we can extrapolate outward to get a sense of how many are there,
Right.
rather than mechanically counting them.
Yeah, you know that they're the driver of the population.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're describing is actually more like a census, and that's closer to what the model is now.
Okay.
It's an integrated population model. But you know, yeah, the ratio of bears in the ecosystem, you know, you have however many adult males, you have however many subadult bears, and females with cubs are driving your population. So it's just a multiplier,
Understood.
essentially. So it got changed to 14 square kilometers,
Mm-hmm.
and that made the estimate more like 1,200 bears.
Okay.
And then what you just described is now what they're doing is an integrated population model, and it's more of a census, and you can plug in other factors.
I got it. So what's the number now?
1,030.
How good do you think that number is?
I think that's pretty accurate. I think there's definitely parts of the ecosystem where there's higher densities than other parts. And growing up in Cody, I just assumed everywhere had really high densities.
Yeah.
And you go to other parts and they're just not. And this new modeling system is going to incorporate some of that and show you where there's more density of bears. And that's only in the demographic monitoring area. So there's bears that live outside where they're even looking for bears. So that is a minimum because they're not counting bears that aren't in suitable habitat.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That might be living year
They're
round.
not counting bears that don't count.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if a bear moves out into if a bear moves out into like Fort Benton out of the Shoto area and just keeps going east, he leaves the counting area.
If he's there year round, if he's outside of their demographic monitoring area. And I don't know about the NCDE, but that's how they did it with the GYE.
Got it.
Yeah.
You got to be in a bear place to be a bear.
Yep.
Pretty
Yeah,
straightforward.
you don't count.
Outliers.
So there's tell me the number again. You think 1,030?
Yeah. And it was as high as 1,200 was the estimate a couple of years ago before they changed to this other model. But it has a lot more factors. It's a lot more accurate,
Got
is
it.
my understanding.
That's good to know. I still thought it was that old.
740.
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
know that anyone moved beyond that number.
That was laughable. People in my hometown never believed that. You know.
Why do they seem to congregate in these little micro areas so much? There's just some like valleys that are like such hot spots. And then you go to another valley and you could go to another valley and hang out there over the years, 10 years and never lay eyes on one. But then there's like, and you can't really tell the difference from looking at them.
It's just food availability, food sources, and some of it's learned behavior. In my part of the woods, we have what are called moth sites, and there's these bears on moth sites. And, you know, I've done flights where I've counted 40 bears on moth sites, so there's a high concentration of food, and that's one of the highest caloric value foods in the ecosystem.
Can you explain what that means?
Caloric value?
No, what a moth. I know about.
Oh.
Yeah, I know a little bit, but just tell people what that is.
So there's these army cutworm moths that migrate from the Midwest, and they come up in the mountains and at night pollinate flowers, and then in the daytime they get in these talus slopes, and they use that as a heat refugia. And bears come along and they flip over those rocks and eat those bugs, and they're probably eating 20 to 40,000 of those moths a day. Yeah,
Licking them up.
Licking them up. Yep. And it's just a really rich food source for bears in the ecosystem. But what I was going to say is there's places in the ecosystem where there's moth sites and there's not bears utilizing them.
Oh,
So they think it's a learned behavior.
like they know about it.
Right. Yep.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you took all the bears out and put new ones back in, they might not find those moths.
Maybe not for a while.
Or they'd use different ones.
Or they could use different ones, yeah.
Yeah. Huh. What are some of the other main foods? Like everybody likes to think of them just, eating elk calves, but what when you had to list like their main grub sources, what do you think it is?
Vegetation. Bears eat a lot of different roots and tubers and corms, and that's a big one in the spring. Elk calves is a big food source. I mean, that's kind of undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
These moth sites, there are a few places in the ecosystem where they eat those cutthroat trout that are spawning, white bark pine. But they did a food synthesis analysis on bears and found that they eat over 260 different plants and animals. So,
No kidding.
yeah, in the Yellowstone ecosystem, they have the most diverse diet.
260 species.
Yep. That bear that I caught that was 624, I figured that he was probably eating meat year round. That bear was going from winter kill carcasses to elk calves to moths to killing cattle in the fall because we'd caught him before killing cattle to eating gut piles. He was eating probably nothing but meat.
How old was that bear?
I don't remember. I caught another bear that was 520 pounds in the spring, same exact location. And I caught him 8 years later, and he was 28 years old.
Wow.
Holy cow, man.
Wow.
So that other bear could be 30.
Oh, I think. Well, when he was 28, that bear was past his prime.
Okay,
So
maybe
you
went
know, this
downhill.
other bear was probably between 15 and 20.
Gotcha.
Man,
That's old.
28.
Zach Turnbull caught one that was 32 in the upper green.
And that's got to be getting close to max.
That's the oldest bear they've
Wow.
caught in the
That's
ecosystem.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
In your mind, what is the most common sort of way things play out when people get scratched up by a bear?
What do you mean? Like, how did they report it?
No, I'm sorry. If you were going to look at from all the things you've heard and seen when someone gets mauled by a bear, what is the normal scenario?
Surprise encounter, probably.
Like you're spooking it.
Yeah, and probably sows with cubs more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I see a big adult male track, I'm not nervous. I see a little tiny cub track, and I'm like, looking around. Yeah.
So it's that you like jump it at close range.
Yeah, that's the majority of them.
Uh-huh.
You know, there's a lot of cases every year where guys get elk down, and there's bears coming into those dead elk, or they're going back to retrieve an elk carcass, and they jump a bear. That's pretty common too. I mean, it's food, cubs, and personal space, and a lot of times you're getting cubs and personal space at the same time.
Got it. And that's trouble.
Yeah.
Do you believe, there's like a thing, I don't know if it's what's the opposite of an urban legend? A rural legend?
Rural myth.
Okay. Like my brother
Country
Danny.
lore.
Redneck talk.
Yeah, my brother Danny, he now and then goes and hunts Kodiak, but after, he hunts in the winter for black-tailed deer, right? And he'll swear when the bears are down, he'll swear that red fox know a gunshot. There's a lot of red fox there. He's like, you shoot a deer and they're just there.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't, they're smelling it, whatever, but it's so fast, you can't help but wonder, like, are they like, oh, they hear that, and they're like, ooh,
Yeah.
and go that way. You hear people say this about grizzlies.
Yeah, all the time.
Do you think that's true?
No, not at all.
You don't think they come to a gunshot?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because I have friends that are really poor shots. I have guided hunters that are really poor shots. And you sit there for 15, 20 minutes and no bear shows up. We have a shooting range outside of Cody.
It's not full of bears.
It's not full of bears. Even though I've caught bears adjacent to it, but they're not running to that thing,
Got it.
So it's really, when you get an animal down, that blood, that rumen smell, that guts, as soon as that hits the air, you got a clock on you. And what I like to do as a guide is start a fire, as long as there's not a fire ban. If I'm in a good location, and start it upwind, because that kind of masks that scent. And fire, the real reason is it calms your hunter down. Because as soon as they kill something, they're like super bear scared.
Yeah. We do that fire thing cutting up moose in Alaska, especially when it's real thick. I'll get a fire going. I don't know if it's like my own. I just have, I don't know. I like to have the idea that it somehow broadcasts the human presence more. Might be total horseshit.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think bears want to come into a fire. So that's just something I've learned since after the Game and Fish,
Have you handled bears that had killed people?
No, I've handled bears that have mauled people. Yeah.
After the mauling?
Yeah.
Didn't you tell me that story about how
Yeah. So
the first
one of my
came on?
Yeah, one of my first conflicts that I came on, I wasn't even hired on full time yet. I came in the office, I was just volunteering on my days off, and my boss was on the phone and he said, I remember him saying, 3, maybe 4 people mauled. I'm on the way to the hospital. And he got off the phone and he said, hey, can you help us for a couple days? And I said, yeah. And there was a mauling by Cook City, a campground called Soda Butte.
Yeah, I know this one.
And there was a human fatality there. And ran up there with a trap. And, that was obviously in Montana, but we assisted Montana and trying to catch those bears. And they set the traps. They caught those bears. I, set traps, but we didn't catch anything. And then I was shuttling samples to our vet lab in Laramie.
What kind of samples?
Well, tissue samples from the bear to make sure that it was a match.
Okay.
But she had mauled 3 people, and the first tent was a young kid and his girlfriend and a dog, and she didn't maul, but she tried to attack 3 different people. She tried to come into that tent, and the dog started barking, and she left it, and that kid got so afraid. I call him a kid. He's probably like 18, 19.
Mm-hmm.
He packed up all of his stuff and left, and that sow went further down the campground, and there was a couple who slept in separate tents because the husband snored. And
Sure they weren't in a fight?
maybe they're in a fight. And that sow ripped into a tent and tried to grab that woman, and she fought it off. And it actually broke a tooth out of the bear's head in her arm.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so weird. Like all the shit he bit in his life, that would break his tooth off.
It was a sow, but she was so malnourished that she was
Got it.
desperate. And those are predatory attacks, obviously, which is different than your defensive aggressive attacks. So then she went further down the campground, and she got in another tent, and she killed and ate a guy, and there was 3 other yearling bears with her through those attacks. So I didn't work up that bear personally, but yeah, I've worked up other bears that have mauled people.
Mm-hmm. Does that give you a creepy feeling?
Yeah. I mean, I will never forget the look in that bear's eyes at Soda Butte. I mean, she was so demoralized, and
Oh, is that right?
yeah, I'll just never forget the way she had her head on her paws and just looked completely demoralized.
Like, what do you mean demoralized?
Just there was like a sadness in her eyes. I don't know how else to
Is
say
that
it.
right?
Yeah. And you catch a lot of bears and see a lot of bears in traps, and they avoid eye contact. That's really normal, but there was just like a feeling about it. I don't know how else to describe it.
Huh. When they're avoiding eye contact, what do you think that is?
In the bear world, that's aggressive posturing. When I was teaching...
Eye contact is aggressive.
Yeah, when I was teaching kids, I'd say, especially middle school girls, when you see somebody in the hallways and you kind of stare them down,
Yeah.
that's aggressive posturing. You're being mean, right?
Yeah.
And they all understand that. And that's the same with bears, is they pretty much avoid eye contact until they're ready to rumble, ready to fight.
So they'll look away from one another.
Yeah. Yep. And those big adult males, when you see them fight, they'll circle each other and they'll be avoiding eye contact. And when they finally get the nerve to lock eyes, that's when they're, trying to fight each other.
Do you think there's a tell if a bear is going to false charge or charge? Do you think there's a physical tell?
Yep. Head posture.
Okay.
If they're really intent on hurting you, their head is as low to the ground as possible. They're trying to get there. And you see that with self-defense shootings a lot of times. Guys aim center mass. Center mass is the hump, and it doesn't kill them when they're shooting bears. If it's a bluff charge, a lot of times their head is high. They're kind of high on their front legs,
Yep.
and they're not coming as fast as they could.
Head down.
Head down. Yep.
Aim low.
Aim low.
With your spray.
Yeah.
With your bird shot.
Yeah. With your bird. Yeah.
At what? Let's say one's coming and you got bear spray. At what distance for you personally? Like at what distance are you touching that spray off?
Oh, 30 yards. Yeah.
And you're just letting it rip.
Let it rip.
Don't be like don't try to conserve.
I'd hold it down for a second and spray, and if it kept coming, I'm gonna keep spraying. But
yeah,
about a second's all it takes.
What do you think about the Wolverine situation? The Wolverine delisting, the Wolverine listing. Do you think the Wolverine listing is warranted?
I think we're living in a time and age where a lot wildlife habitat's just getting chopped up, and Wolverines need a really big home range. And there were lynx in Wyoming, and they just kind of blinked out, and nobody ever noticed.
Got it.
So, I don't know a ton about wolverines, but I think you probably got to do everything you can to protect their habitat at this point.
You think so?
Yeah, and they just have such a huge home range, and this was probably the furthest south extent of their habitat anyways,
Yeah.
right?
Well, down into Colorado.
Yeah, historically, they're probably
Yeah.
that far down.
Yeah, I think that they use 250 square miles,
500.
500 square miles.
That's wild.
It's more
Just
than I
double
use.
that number. We'd hope.
But same thing with lynx, they went really far south, and I had a friend that was a trapper, and he'd always say, it's not like the Canadians are excited every time a bobcat crosses into Canada.
That's a good point.
It's just, we have a different mentality because they're coming south.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What do you think about wolverines?
Man, I think that we lack any kind of historic reference. So when someone goes and looks and they think that there's a low number of wolverines, that no one's ever looked at it in a sophisticated sense before. One way you could look at the research they did is you'd say, man, there's wolverines all over the place. Right? Because they go out and they hang the carcasses and do the trail cam stuff and catch hares.
Yeah, I actually did that one winter.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
And so you'd look and be like, wow, like one interpretation would be like, huh, that's cool. There's a lot of wolverines out there because no one knew. But instead you take that you realize there aren't many, but you don't know how many there ever were.
Right.
And then you point to an area, in Canada that had seen a decline, but it's not the same kind of area. You're on the southern edge and you just go like, there aren't many, therefore they must be endangered. I feel like without being able to have a
baseline,
like a demonstrated decline over time, I'm a little suspect. And I also am a little suspect because I think that I think that it's a little bit of a red herring. I think that they're being used as a tool to get at something different.
Sure, that's probably saving habitat.
Yeah, and it's like we want to save habitat, which I totally understand. We want to save habitat. We want to slow certain development. The way to do that is to do the Wolverine and get the Wolverine listed, but then the Wolverine will get listed. And it'll wind up being that you'll see that you can't go and snowmobile in certain areas and you can't trap in certain areas. And you'd be like, but running a snowmobile and trapping don't do habitat destruction. If this is all about habitat destruction, why do we got to do it this way?
Well,
this is very personal.
Yeah.
Steve's still collecting his thoughts on this subject.
Back to the point I made earlier about lynx blinking out in Wyoming, there's a chance that part of that was because of snowmobiles, and what that does is creates a path for coyotes to go kill snowshoe hares, which obviously lynx are dependent on.
Got it.
And so, it doesn't seem like snowmobiling has an impact, but it may.
One of the weirdest ones of those.
God, I don't want to be like a.
No,
you make me sound very green here.
That's great. Listen, that's great for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it's good things to be curious about.
Yeah.
Think about this one time. We spent a lot of time years ago on when there were still some caribou that were living in the Idaho Panhandle.
Yeah.
And the efforts to try to save those caribou in the Selkirk range, and they would come into Idaho Panhandle.
Sure.
And right now, there's no caribou in the lower 48.
Yeah, super sad.
When they looked at that, an interesting thing was that they were seeing so much wolf predation on caribou. And it was like, well, why wasn't there, that's nothing new.
Mm-hmm.
You've had wolves on the landscape, right? In BC, the caribou there, why wasn't it? It was like white-tailed deer numbers. Like certain timber harvest practices,
right,
created a lot of white-tailed deer and elk and moose habitat.
Yeah.
As you brought up that number of ungulates, this is a theory, obviously. As you brought up that number of ungulates at the edge of caribou habitat, it created an incentive for wolves to hunt in the area. And once wolves had taken the habit of hunting in that area because they're killing deer, they're killing moose, they're getting some caribou. Historically, there hadn't been enough like biomass on the landscape to warrant them hunting the area. And they would just be elsewhere. It's a theory, but it's interesting. And your thing of like you do this, and coyotes now push up on snowmobile trails and hunt, and they got a way to get from spot to spot. And it's a human caused. It's a human caused, very like step by step, kind of hard to track.
Yeah, I think the
sequence of events.
The correlation's probably when snowmobiles got souped up. I'd be curious if that was like the years when those animals' behavior started to change.
Got it. When high marking became a thing.
Yeah, because when I was growing up, you were about a foot off the ground, and that thing didn't go very fast.
Yeah.
But now you can go anywhere with a snowmobile.
Yeah.
So
I picked up a Wolverine on a trail camera last year.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
Yeah, I felt like I was real excited. I sent it to everybody. It was like trapping.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like trapping to get one.
Yeah.
On a camera.
No. We've had some game fish guys get some on cameras, but it's really rare. And when they were doing that population estimate, it was, I want to say not more than 5 in the whole state. And they put a lot of effort into trying to identify wolverines. Something that was really cool, though, is they had a wolverine that had a white arm with a black spot. So really unique. And she'd actually been caught in the northern part of Yellowstone and had a number and I think for a while had a transmitter in her. I'm not sure if that's true, but she was 14 years old, I want to say.
Wow, really?
Yep. Because she was so identifiable.
They knew about how many in Wyoming?
Well, through all the, I think the population estimate is probably 20.
Is it that low?
It's that low. Yeah.
Jeez, really?
God, I might be misspeaking. 20 to 50. 100. No more than
no more than 740.
740.
We got a lot better habitat though here.
Yeah.
In the northwest part of the state.
So how far away was she? You said she had been caught in the northern part of Yellowstone. Do you know where she was then re-identified? How far away?
Fishhawk is probably 80 miles away.
Wow.
Like that.
In 21 and 22, Wyoming Game and Fish said approximately 24 wolverines.
Ah, look at this guy.
It's been a while since I thought about that.
Man, it makes my camera thing seem even cooler.
You know who Osborne Russell is?
Sure, man. He calls them common.
Yeah, and he talks about them by Salt Lake. So
yeah, there's a lot of.
He calls them common.
There's a lot of Carcajou references in the Mountain Man journals.
That oral history stuff does, because I would not call them common.
Right. So there's got to be more than there is now.
Yeah. Osborne Russell, we covered this we're working on a thing called the Mountain Men.
Yeah, sure.
Part of our American history series. And the other thing that you just wouldn't believe is the number of bighorns.
Oh, yeah.
In the early 1800s.
Yeah.
Like, not elk.
Right.
Bighorns. Hundreds of bighorns.
I've talked
living on bighorns.
Yeah, bighorns and deer. I've talked to Larry Todd about this, and there's only 2 Indian camps in Wyoming that have elk parts in them. So what I don't understand is there's a really big elk migration that comes from Yellowstone, and it goes to south of Cody, and I imagine it's been going on for thousands of years, but you think maybe there weren't that many elk back then, or it was more buffalo than elk. And
yeah, Osborne Russell would run into people who were like sheep specialists,
sheep eaters.
Yeah, sheep hunters.
Yeah, we have a bunch of artifacts around us that were sheep eater artifacts. They're part of the Shoshone tribe, but
Shoshone.
Shoshone.
We just learned
Yeah.
that. That's why it's correcting.
Yeah,
I actually asked a Shoshone person.
yeah. That's it. Well, I've never known
He
that.
was open to either, but strongly preferred Shoshone.
Yeah,
Well, what's the river that flows through Cody?
Shoshone.
Oh, that's yeah.
That's I know that's what got yeah. So it's
And
just
there's
funny.
a- there's
He was
a
sitting right-
town.
he was sitting right in the seat you're sitting in.
Okay. Well, he,
Yeah,
he
the
would know. Sounds like he
Shoshone,
would know.
Idaho. The rivers and the places go by Shoshone, but the people go by Shoshone. Is sort of what.
Oh no, but he was Arapaho.
Yeah, but he lives with. Yeah,
lives with
but
the
that's sort
Shoshone.
of the conclusion we collectively arrived at.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen the bows that those sheep eaters make?
No, but I read Osborne Russell's description of the bows.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. There's a guy named Bob Lucas that there's a video of him making one. But they take a bighorn sheep horn and they reverse the curl, and then they glue it and tie it together, and it's basically a recurve bow.
They steam it and reverse it, right?
Yep.
Osborne Russell figures very heavily into the thing we're working on because he did such a good job of
Documenting stuff.
such a phenomenal job of making a journal. Tell me about your guiding business. Who do you guide for?
I've guided for a bunch of different outfitters, to be honest, and I took this season pretty much off because I just had a kid. But I've worked for Yellowstone Country Outfitters, 307 Outfitters, Rand Creek Outfitters, Livingston Outfitters. So I've got to see a lot of country.
And your specialty is horseback trips?
Yeah, everything's horseback and mule.
Mm-hmm.
Sawbucks or deckers?
Sawbuck guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never understood that. The Montana guys,
Yeah,
they
I've
can't
always-
take a toothbrush if they don't mani it. You know.
Yeah,
That's what
I've always
saddlebags
thought
are
the
for.
same thing.
Yeah, we always laugh at sawbucks.
Yeah.
We're decker guys.
You'll have to teach me some.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trade.
It seems pretty easy
Tell
to just
people what
hang
you're
them on
talking
the...
about.
So there's two style of pack saddles. One's what you call a sawbuck, which seems self-explanatory.
Yeah,
And you just hang your
bags on it. Yeah.
hang panniards, and then you have a lash rope where you tie a hitch to keep everything pinned down. And Montana guys run what's called decker pack saddles, and they have ropes hanging off the bars on their packs, and then they tie a hitch, usually with something that's manied up. So they pack all their camping stuff in a canvas mani and fold it up real nice.
Like a mani-pedi.
Yeah, mani pedi. That's right.
Sort of.
You're tracking.
Yeah.
You're tracking.
Help me out here.
Yeah, no, that's accurate.
I don't know what you
I
guys
don't know.
do.
My theory is decker, like when you lash down a decker saddle, say with Yeti coolers, and then you can crow's foot it to really lash it down. You can bump into a lot more trees and have it stay set compared to sawbuck saddles might move around a little bit more or get loose. I don't know. I've never
I
packed
run
a
some pretty
sawbuck.
steep country. You gotta,
Well, steep maybe.
Come
What
check
about
it
how
out.
thick is it?
it's pretty thick.
Well, hey,
Sounds like it's
See-
thick and steep.
to each their own, I guess. Whatever style floats your boat.
I know that you can pack real awkward loads with deckers. They're a lot more versatile.
Yeah, we would pack raft frames, 16-foot raft frames
Yeah.
on them on the uphill side.
Okay. Yeah, we just don't take that stuff. So
Yeah, very awkward boats.
Are you mostly deer, mostly elk?
I've done it all: sheep, mountain goat, deer, elk. Not grizzly bear, but everything else.
Black
Someday.
bears?
No, never have guided black bears actually. Kind of got burnt out on the bear thing. So
Oh, messing with bears?
Yeah.
Like a person gets a job at an ice cream shop, then they don't like ice cream no more?
exactly, exactly. Same reason I don't eat Mexican food.
And you're looking for you're between careers now.
You know, I'm doing construction, but I'm definitely open to doing something that benefits wildlife. I don't want the best thing that I've done for wildlife to be catching and killing bears. So
What drove you to? Do you mind saying why did you leave the state agency in Wyoming, Fish and Game?
I was just really personally conflicted with some of the management decisions that were being made. You know, so there were a lot of reasons. I was super burnt out. If I had to give one more bear safety talk, I was gonna suck start a 44.
Got it.
or bear spray.
What would be an area of management? Like, what would be like an area of management that you would find conflict? You don't need to tell me the exact conflict, but when you say that, what do you mean?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Like, do you mean the way they set harvest objectives? Or the way they
where I had conflict,
or was it like administrative issues? You know?
Yeah, it was leadership, and I just didn't feel like relocation and removal decisions were really consistent. So
God, on the bear question.
So it was like how you're handling individual bears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I'd had a certain standard with my old boss, and I just felt like it wasn't the same.
This is my last question for you. Do you, give me your personal take. I like came in so hot and heavy on delisting. What's your personal take on delisting?
I think it's the best thing to keep states into managing bears, which is probably the best thing for the people on the landscape. And I also think hunting is a positive because it creates advocates for wildlife, creates advocates for bears. People right now say there's too many bears on the landscape, but as soon as you start hunting them, they'll be like, I don't know where all the big bears have gone. These guys are hunting too many. It's the non-residents.
Yeah. It'll just be some other boogeyman.
Yeah, that's a good point, man.
So, but they continue to expand, and a big issue that the courts see is that genetic connectivity between the GYE and the NCDE. And right now they're only 36 miles apart. And I think that whether you delist or not, I think they eventually make that connectivity. But there was a bear that showed up in the Bighorns 2 years ago, actually. And, you know, that bear was removed, euthanized right away. And I think they're going to continue to expand, whether you try to contain them or not.
Oh, was that a containment decision?
Social acceptance, you know, but we've caught and killed a lot of bears over the years, and you're just trying to contain them into the absorcas. This year they'll hit 70 bears that have died in the Yellowstone ecosystem, and probably 40 of those will be management removals. And you got everything from bears getting killed in irrigation canals. There were bears electrocuted. There's bears that get hit by vehicles, like 399, obviously. So
70 in one calendar year?
Yeah, I think it'll be a record year this year.
Montana's at 28 right now.
Wow.
I don't think it's over yet. There's still bears out.
One of the arguments I heard from when I talked about, I was joking, and I half joking about Montana chickening out on the bear hunt, but one of the things they brought up is they had no, they felt that their quota would get hit by non-hunting purposes, and if they did a hunt, this is kind of like the logic, right?
Yeah.
If they did a hunt and killed a couple bears, they would burn up their quota. And then they wouldn't be able to do bear management on problem bears because they would have already hit their human cause quota.
Doesn't sound unreasonable.
Feels more like across that bridge when you come to a problem.
Yeah.
I think again, it's what the number you believe is in the ecosystem, and the reason Wyoming was going to be so high is because 12 of those bears were going to be outside the demographic monitoring area. So they weren't even counted towards the population.
Got it.
You know, and the DMA is about 20,000 square miles, and bear distribution right now is about 50,000 square miles.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is a grizzly coming to a neighborhood near you?
Yeah. So everywhere I would go, people would go, there's kids in the neighborhood. You got to get this bear out of here, you know. And then one lady called me and she goes, there's old people in this neighborhood. You got to get this bear out of here. I'm like, oh, there's no appropriate age to live with a bear.
There's two things that are going to happen. I like to joke about golfers, and Montana's uniquely situated.
Gophers?
A golfer.
Gophers?
No. I believe that someday Montana will have a golfer get mauled while golfing
Oh,
in whitefish.
Yeah, probably at Meadow Lake Resort, Columbia Falls.
Well,
In Big Sky.
They caught
Yeah.
one on a golf course down the Bitterroot.
Yeah, we will have. It'll be. I hope he doesn't get it bad. If he gets it bad, I'll feel bad. But it'll be an interesting day when we have a golfer get mauled.
Digging through the rough looking for his Titleist.
I always
Yeah,
want-
it's probably not going to be a good golfer because he's going to be
Yeah.
sticking to the fairways and
He's
greens.
gonna be down in the he's gonna be down in the creek bottom looking for his golf ball.
Another good reason to work on your backswing.
Yeah, we're gonna have a golfer get mauled, and that's gonna change public opinion. And then for whatever reason, like we have a little mountain range right here in town.
Bridgers.
Not right here. I mean, it's way bigger than that, but it
Yeah.
toes off like this. Toes off into town. And man, there's grizzlies right across the highway.
I know, 36 miles.
And it's like at some point in time, we have this real popular hiking trail called the M.
Yeah.
It's not out of it's like a reasonable thing that someone's going to get scratched up on the M hill. I feel like that'll impact public opinion. When a golfer gets it,
Yeah, I mean, there's in Missoula the Rattlesnake Wilderness right there. You can take a city bus to it, and they had a sow and cubs that set up in one of the first gulches there. That's like a really popular mountain biking area. But I remember going to an event, and there's a bear biologist there talking about grizzlies coming into the Missoula area, and he's like, they're in Gold Creek, they're down on the golf courses in the Bitterroot, they're in the Rattlesnake, and he said, I would be surprised if in 5 years there aren't sort of resident known bear families, population groups here and there in the city or around the city, I should say.
I don't want people to think I'm bringing that up. Like a golfer getting scratched. I'm not bringing this up as a thing that I'm worried about. And I don't think it's a negative. I mean, not the golfer gets scratched. I'm not saying I think I'd love it if we had bears. I'd like it if there's grizzlies all over town. Like,
Go to Anchorage.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like them.
Yeah.
I'm not an anti-bear guy whatsoever.
Right.
I love the bears. I like seeing them. I get excited when I see them. I never meet anybody who's bummed out that they saw a grizzly.
Yeah.
I
Well,
love them.
as soon as you get mauled, people's attitude
Sure.
changes.
I love them. I just want it to go. I want it to be that there's a bunch of bears, and I want it to be that there's a state managed and there's a tag draw. That's what I want,
Yeah. Everybody thinks about their self-interest, right?
especially me.
Yeah. I think it's the story that you portray into the future here. It's how people paint bears. So 399 is a great example. Like you could paint her as a bear that mauled people, or you could paint her as the biggest advocate for bears in the world. So
Yeah.
future bears is up to the public, really.
Yeah. And you mentioned like everybody wants what their own self-interest is. I should clarify that I'm not going to draw a grizzly bear tag. I
Yeah.
live in a state that had they done it, I don't know that I would even put in for the tag.
Yeah.
Okay. We didn't do it. If we did one, you're not going to draw it. I mean, what are the odds you're going to draw it? It's like I've been applying for bighorn sheep tag for decades. Haven't drawn one yet.
Do you think a lot of people would? A lot?
No, not like yeah. You get you're not going to draw it. Like the draws are going to be slim. So it's not like I feel that this is my pathway.
Yeah.
I mean, I hunt in Alaska every year. This isn't my I'm not pursuing this because it's my personal pathway to getting a grizzly. It's like it's not going to happen. I'm not going to get a grizzly in Montana. I'm not going to get a grizzly in Idaho. I'm not going to get a grizzly in Wyoming. This isn't all me, with some like Machiavellian plan by which I'll be able to hunt grizzlies
You're just being a realist.
in my neighborhood. It's like just as an advocate for hunters and as an advocate for state management and as an advocate for responsible use of renewable resources. Here's an animal that was historically a game animal, that has people there's people that hunt them in other places. There's a desire to hunt them. Hunting them is not incompatible with having a stable population, as we've demonstrated with mountain lions, black bears, white-tailed deer, mule deer, elk, moose,
Right.
bighorn sheep, mountain goats. I could go on and on.
Right.
It's not incompatible. I don't know why this should be any different.
This guy's putting in.
You know what I'll do right now? You know what I'm gonna do right now?
He's
What?
gonna make a bet, right?
No, I'm gonna tell you
Up the
something right now.
street.
I'm gonna tell you something right now. Just because you said that, I promise I won't put in
Okay.
For
okay.
how long?
ever.
Oh, wow.
I won't put in.
Wow.
I won't put in.
It's a true advocate.
And you go scroll the
Purist.
records and see if you ever see me put in. I won't
Yeah.
put in.
I got friends. I'll call.
Yeah, I'm not gonna put in. I said one time before, like talk about in drilling in Anwar.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh yeah, just because you hunt up there all the time. I'm like, okay, if I could sign a contract that said they won't drill Anwar, but I can't ever go there, I would sign the contract.
Right. Me too.
It's
'Cause
like,
I'm not going there.
yeah, it's like, okay, fine, I don't need to go there. Just whatever, it's fine. And if I had to sign a contract, we'll delist and turn over to state management and create a hunting season tomorrow, but you have to agree that you'll never apply for a tag. I'd be like, okay, cool. It's like, that's not what it is for me.
I think the real question here is, can you get bears off the list? Can you have state management without people continuing to sue and tear down the ESA? Or do you have to change the ESA in order to get animals delisted? And I think that would be horrible. If you don't get bears off the list, you know.
That's why my advice to people who support the ESA is to
Right.
stop effing around with the ESA,
Quit weaponizing it.
because you're gonna do to the ESA what they did to the spotted owl. Like the spotted owl used to be an owl,
Yeah.
and then it became a symbol of overreach, right? You're gonna now create. You're gonna be like, here you sit. Like, let's say you were like Joe ESA, right? You're like the diehard defender of the ESA. My advice to you: stop weaponizing the ESA. Then delist that bear, which hit recovery objectives 25 years ago,
Yeah, but
and move on to what's next.
the reason I brought up that bear in the bighorns is that's in the DPS and that's unoccupied habitat. So, you know, in theory, the ESA calls for bears moving into that suitable habitat.
But they mapped out, when they listed them, they mapped out recovery objectives, and they hit recovery objectives 20 some years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So why bother? Why bother having an Endangered Species Act? Why bother making recovery objectives if it's just bullshit?
Yeah,
If you don't mean it.
yeah. It
Two-
erodes public trust, no doubt about it.
2% of the things that go on the ESA come off because of recovery. Okay. Things will come off because they realize it wasn't warranted. Things will come off because they'll go extinct. 2% of the things that go on the ESA come off because of recovery. Here you have a recovered thing. Why is it not celebrated?
Right.
They didn't bitch. Like eagles came off, no problem. Peregrine falcon. Like, but this one, they just got to hold it tight to their chest
Yep.
because it's not about the ESA.
It's a moneymaker, is what it is.
Yeah. So forget me saying I'm coming at it from a perspective of a hunter. I'm coming at it from a perspective of someone that wants to get on with to like salvage the ESA and not make it that it just is a thing of derision.
I'm glad I bolstered your argument.
No, thank you. Cut all that out, Phil, so I can just start saying that like I thought of it. Well, man, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's good to meet you guys.
Is there anything that you wish you got to talk about that I didn't ask you about?
I meant to talk about snaring bears. That's something I didn't talk about.
Tell me about that.
So another way we catch them is with foot snares,
Mm-hmm.
and you use what's called an aldridge spring, and you put the spring in a snare loop, and you dig a hole, and then you recreate the surface as though it's just ground, and you try to get a bear to step in that, and that's a fun part of trapping. So
How do you get them to step in there? Hanging a bait?
a lot of times you have a cubby set, and you're trying to direct them into your set, but you're putting sticks, and bears don't like to step on sticks and hurt their feet, so you can kind of control their foot movement with those.
When you're doing that, so he actually thinks he's putting his foot on the ground and his foot breaks through the ground.
Yeah, and it hits this
Pit trap.
Yeah, it's a pit trap. It hits this trigger, and that trigger flings a spring, and that pulls that snare cable tight, and the snare cable just has a little bracket that only slides one way,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you caught a bear.
And can you is he too messed up, or can you release him?
Oh yeah, no, you release those bears.
He's got to be pissed.
Do you get him on video when
Yeah.
you do that?
I got some.
Sounds like a fun visual.
Mm-hmm.
got some pictures somewhere, I think, but
He's pissed.
a lot of times they're trying to run off and they hit the end of that snare cable and they roll over, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they are pissed and they try to charge you.
Yep. And in regular trapping, you call that blocking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A bobcat trapper was explaining one time that people will use blocking for bobcats, but what they don't realize is bobcats want to stand on little things.
Mm.
So they'd put little rocks to block or put a log to block, but he wants to be on that.
Yeah.
So this guy, you know the sycamore, a sycamore ball. They don't live around here, but it's like that
No.
little pokey little. It's like a pokey little seed
Mhm.
pod. There's this trapper that he doesn't even live in that area, but he gets big things of those sycamore things because it's real spiky, and the cat don't want to put his foot on it.
Mm.
So then you can actually control his foot placement. But if you put a stick there, and that cat's like, "Oh, sweet, thanks," and misses the pan because he's standing on your blocking. The stuff that's supposed to keep him from wanting to do it.
Yeah.
So you want stuff that looks like uncomfortable for his foot.
Interesting.
Yeah, keep that in mind.
I will. I might just go trap bears on my own just for fun.
Just catch and release bear trapping.
Yeah. Whose ear tag is this?
Well, dude, thanks for coming out, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks
Yeah.
for having me.
And good luck
Nice
on
to
your
meet you
job
guys.
hunt.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Name what line of work you want, because maybe someone will call you and give you a job.
Land conservation, I think, could be up my alley. I think that would be beneficial to wildlife. So, should I throw out my email? Can I do that?
Hell yeah,
If you
man.
you can throw out your email if you want a bajillion people messaging you, or they can email us. Yeah, that's fine. Or they can also
let him
email us.
dig
with
through his own job
offers. But
offers,
go ahead.
man.
Yep, that's true.
My email is just dusty.lasseter, Lasseter 10 at Gmail.
Looking for work.
Looking for work. I got a great job. I have a great boss, but I still want to do something that benefits wildlife.
I got a construction project I might lay out in front of you too.
I can handle it.
It's in Grizzly country.
Yeah. I'm a mediocre carpenter, but
That's the kind I'm looking for.
yeah. Perfect. More of a painter. No, just kidding.
All right, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fingers and toes so cold that they burn. We'd stand in the creek in our rubber knee highs, just long enough for me to warm up, and then back to the brush chasing cottontail hides. Just 10, but I got to join in. Carol protested, Grandpa was firm. Well, I've had him shooting since he was knee high. And this is the day that he earned. Then Annie broke loose with the ball on the wind, hot on the trail and bringing her around. Up ahead, just into the lane where case-colored Stevens put two on the ground. The morning turned hot, and Annie was singing. Game pouches filled as the shot shells all flew. Headed toward home, and I couldn't help grinning. My fingers all numb and my lips turning blue. At the end of November, the memories all wash over me, bittersweet. Dawn is the early morn cottontail hunting, and afternoon targets and skeet. Dinner feast of 40-odd people with cousins and uncles who I Dad was a way of it back in my youth. I watched it all change through the years. As time will erode both bedrock and bone, and old age wilts even the most fierce. Grandpa we lost in the cold of December. Carol a few turns before. I bought the farm